Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you, and today we've got a pretty special knife. This is the Jaros K2A, a Midtech knife from knife maker Jesse Jaros. You may be familiar with his work. Let me flip this over so you can see his maker's mark there. You've seen this on a few K-bars recently. They did a folder last year, and I believe this year they came out with a large sort of a chopper. They all tend to have this distinctive back design. Anyway, when I was researching for my review of the K-bar Jaros folder, I became familiar with this knife. Just so many people just praising it and talking about how much they loved it that I really wanted to check one out for myself. And so I've been pretty happy to be able to do that. By the way, just in kind of introduction, the way Jesse does this is he does sale Sundays. So if you follow him on Instagram or I don't know what other social media he has, Facebook, Twitter, whatever else might be out there, he does have a YouTube channel that you may want to check out. And so anyway, if you follow him in some of those ways, you can find out when those sale Sundays are coming up and then take advantage of that and pick one up. So I ended up getting this from the secondary market. I was waiting for a sale Sunday, and just while I was waiting, one came up for a good price, so I was able to get a hold of it. And by the way, that's the last point I want to make here. This is a Midtech. By Jesse's own admission, these are 70% hand done and 30% machine done. So that means, you know, he's farming out some of the work and then the components are coming to him and he's doing the rest by hand. And that's pretty cool. If you're one of those people who, you know, want to sort of break the ice and get into something a little more custom, or if you're someone who really likes the full-on definition of Midtech, because let's be honest, a lot of what are called Midtechs these days are really high-end production, right? The maker may not even have seen your knife. That's not so with this. Jesse's going to be working on every one, which I don't know about you, but I find pretty cool. Yes, that does affect the price because you're literally paying for someone's hand labor at that point, which is going to cost more. But these are actually pretty affordable. I think the starting point for the G10 ones is like $395 or something. Which, you know, that's a Sabenza, that's a Hinderer, that's even, you know, some of the high-end Chinese knives are going for that. And yet here you're getting a knife where the maker has literally put this thing together by hand and given it that individualized attention, which to me has some value to it, okay? Now, let's get into size and weight. By the way, if you have more questions about that, hold on. I'm going to make a video about that. So you may want to make sure you hit like and subscribe and follow what I'm doing so that, you know, in the next week or two when I talk about the cost of custom knives, you'll be able to be in on that video. Anyway, let's get back to what we're talking about here. Size and weight on this guy is 8 5/16 inches overall, so just a little more than 8 1/4. 3 9/16 on the blade. Okay, so that's just a teeny bit over 3.5 inches. The handle length on this guy when it's closed in your pocket is going to be 4 13/16, so just a little more than 4 3/4. And the weight is a reasonable, a little bit heavy, but reasonable 4.8 ounces, okay? So again, under 5 ounces, it's not overly heavy at all. And even that weight is pretty understandable when you just take a look at the construction of this knife. You know, the thickness of the components, the amount of material that's here kind of demands a certain amount of bulk, okay? And I'm sure that a little bit of weight is removed by the drill pattern that he uses on both sides. Now, let's get started by in our specific discussion by talking about the blade. This is, I guess, a modified clip point more so than a, you know, it's not really a reverse tanto. I would more be inclined to call it a modified clip point. Nice hollow grind here, very, very thin behind the edge. Excellent, excellent slicer. You know, as an EDC knife that you're going to be using for, you know, maybe a little bit of food prep and that kind of stuff, this knife functions really, really nicely. It's fairly thick blade stock, but the performance on it is really good because of that hollow grind. And you guys, you know, I'm kind of beating a dead horse here, but you guys know I like hollow grinds just for that reason. The steel is AEBL on this, and that's very chemically equivalent to 13C28N. This is a steel that you're going to see a lot if you start looking at custom knives. It's highly favored by custom makers because it tends to be a little easier for them to work with. The problem that I did find about it is that a lot of guys won't have the ability to heat treat this in-house. They'll have to send it out because it does need to get pretty hot in order to get a proper heat treat. That said, it can get very, very hard, and that's nice because, of course, we want that nice hardness for edge retention. And to me, anyway, this steel has performed really, really well. In fact, I've only lightly had to touch it up a couple of times. It has held an edge really, really well for me. You know, it's not M390 or something like that, but I definitely have no complaints about edge retention. In terms of, you know, a utility, the question of utility, does this cut well? Does it perform well as a blade? Yeah, for me, it has worked really, really nicely. I also really like the design on this. I like the swedge here and the nice little angle on the tip. It makes a blade that's both attractive and looks, I don't know, it's just a nice combination between, you know, being fairly robust and heavy duty, while at the same time being very functional and attractive. So I think the blade is a real win on this guy. In fact, I would say probably one of my favorite things about these knives. And when I was looking for one, there are a number of blade shapes available but I was concerned that I definitely wanted to get this particular blade shape. Moving on to lockup and deployment, as you can see, it is a titanium frame lock. Obviously titanium on one side, G10 on the other. And you're seeing right now one of the issues that I've had with this knife sometimes. If you touch the lock, so since we're talking about lockup and deployment right now anyway, I will say I do have a bit of a complaint about the detent here. If you touch the lock bar, forget it. The detent ball tends to almost lock into that detent hole, and it's really, really hard to get open. If you keep your fingers off the lock bar, it's fine, and you can see the action is actually quite nice. But let me see if I can demonstrate for you here. So I'm going to put my fingers here on the back of the lock bar, not even the top, and try to open this with my thumb, and you can see that I just cannot do it. So I've got to take two fingers like that, and then I can open it up. And as long as you kind of keep in mind not to do that, it opens up just fine. But yeah, you get your fingers on that lock bar and you are going to have issues. So that would be one point that I would subtract some points. And I can't say for sure if every knife leaving Jesse's shop is like that, but certainly this one is crazy on the way that detent ball locks into the blade there if you put some pressure on it. Otherwise, very smooth, and when you don't have it locked in, the detent is actually really nice. It's just crisp enough, it lets go really nicely, and you get a really solid deployment. Blade is very, very solid. The lockup is good, side to side, up and down play, zero, which is nice. I do have one other complaint, and I'm going to see if I can show. Yeah, there you go. You can see the Teflon washers in there, and as you guys know, I, like most people, would prefer not to see Teflon, but they're pretty common, and it's not the end of the world. Now, one thing I will say that Jesse has done right on this knife is the washers are as big as they can possibly be, and I hope that makes sense to you guys. I mean, think of building a tower out of blocks. Do you want a big wide base to set your stuff on, or do you want something small? And obviously the answer is the bigger it is, the more solid, the more reliable. And so larger washers are definitely a plus on a folder. And that's something that, you know what I mean? Like, it's just a washer. The cost for going to a larger size is not that high. And so it's a little frustrating when companies don't do that. I'd like to see the largest possible washer on any given knife that can be on it. And so from that respect, I've got to say this is very well done. The other thing that I should say while we're talking about action is it's nice and smooth, and staying away from bearings, I think, for sort of a hard use knife. And this is definitely designed to be a user, designed to be carried with you all the time. And staying away from washers for that role, I think, is a good idea, because it just eliminates a possible point of failure. So, lockup and deployment, definitely very functional, very solid. A couple little hiccups there, but overall, you know, the knife does its job, right? Or I mean, the lockup and deployment, those aspects of the knife function the way that they're supposed to, generally speaking. Handle. Well, First off, let me say I love the way this handle is constructed. I really like the G10 only on these, and I wish companies like ZT, even Hinderer, would kind of think about that. It's obviously strong enough. I mean, there are knives out there made of just G10, and you may recall some examples of knives. There are a few out there in YouTube land where a G10 only knife, the actual steel blade broke before the G10 handle. So it's a very strong material. Titanium lock side, obviously. All Torx screws here, which is nice to see. Very nice stonewash on this. And, you know, I honestly can't, I don't know why it does this, but when you put a stonewash on titanium, it does provide a little bit of extra grip. The G10 here is fairly smooth, but it's rubbery enough that you do get a good grip. The jimping on the back of the blade here is really nice. It's just sharp enough and does really lock you in nicely. So materials and construction is all good. Obviously it's a single position clip there. You're not going to move that around. The lanyard hole is here integrated into the back spacer. Again, quite functional, no issue with that. And I like the fact that it doesn't sort of detract from the design of the knife. So the design stays very clean without, you know, there's no big hole here or something making the knife look, I don't know, detracting from the looks of the knife, let's say it that way. Pocket clip does function very well. It's not a deep carry clip, but that's not the end of the world. You know, I like a deep carry clip when I can get it, but it's not a deal breaker at all for me, and I really don't think it should be for most people. The reality is, as long as the knife doesn't fall out, the clip is doing its job. And this clip is fairly comfortable. You may remember on the K-bar, I complained about the clip creating a bit of a hot spot. And I pointed out that if the knife were a little bigger, it wouldn't do that. Well, this knife is a little bigger and the clip works absolutely fine. It's very, very comfortable in hand, so no issue with that. That pretty much covers everything that I want to talk about for the handle. Oh yeah, there is one thing here. Ergonomically, the one sort of issue that I have is this handle, its design and where this finger choil is placed tends to push your hand back on the knife. So notice, here's the front of my finger. The closest I can get to my work surface is almost an inch, okay? It's not quite an inch, but it's probably 3/4. And the angle here even tends to push it back further, right? As this slides into my palm, it tends to put my hand kind of back here, which is fine. It's very comfortable like this, but if I'm doing fine detailed work, I kind of want to be up here on the material, on whatever I'm doing. And this is definitely not a finger choil. It doesn't work for that at all. Okay, so that's my only complaint, and really it's more of a theoretical complaint. I often prefer finger choils for that, but I will say that when I'm using this knife, and I've used it a fair bit, I don't find it to be a real problem. So it's not that I'm telling you, hey, I had a hard time cutting anything. Just a preference of mine is to be able to get this finger here as close to the blade, or as close to the heel of the blade here as I can. All right. So those are a couple little hits there ergonomically. Finally, let's get to some comparisons. This is definitely a hard use EDC knife designed to be carried and used regularly. So I tried to stick with knives that kind of fit that same category. The most obvious comparison, I think, because of size and construction, is definitely the Hinderer. Again, sort of overbuilt, thick, heavy-duty components, good ergonomics. Now, I do like the finger choil, of course, there, but this is a production knife, of course, so you're not quite in the same ballpark, but I think a very good comparison, and someone who's considering either one of these I think would do well to consider the other. I've got another knife that's definitely in the same vein, sort of hard use, designed to be used, carried, and that is the Curtis F3, of course. Again, you know, heavy duty components, you know, fairly large, fairly hand filling. This, of course, is the medium F3. The large F3 would be quite a bit bigger and maybe not quite as comparable, therefore. What else have I got? Oh yeah, well, thinking of bigger, there's the Cold Steel 4max. Again, a very hard use knife. Now, it's not going to carry nearly as comfortably as the Jaros, but it is a knife that I think of as being overbuilt, designed to be carried and used, really designed to take a beating. and really come through for the user. Let's get into now a couple of more production style knives. Here's the zero tolerance 0560, the 0562, the 0566. A number of ZTs I would say would be comparable to this, both in construction and size and even purpose. Now I do like the blade grind on the Jaros a little better than pretty much any ZT. They tend to be ground a little thicker behind the edge than this guy is, and so aren't going to deliver quite, and I say quite, as good cutting performance. Let's pull in a Benchmade since we've got him here. Again, a hard use knife, bigger of course than the Jaros, but still in that same vein of designed to be used and carried and really designed to kind of take a beating and keep working well. What else have we got? Now in a lighter knife, matching G10 however, would be the Para 2, very similar in size, but notice one of the things people complain about the Para is the blade to handle ratio and the amount of cutting edge, and so here you're definitely making up for that. You got lots of cutting edge and a little smaller in the handle. Of course, a little heavier. One other smaller, sort of thickly built knife, and that is the Line Steel Kerr. Again, quite a bit cheaper on the Kerr. You're not getting a Midtech at all, just a regular production knife, and it's a flipper rather than an opening hole, but very thick, you know, thick blade stock, good EDC knife. So all of those I think kind of fall into a similar vein as this. They're designed to be carried, used, they're designed to take quite a beating and still do their job. And I guess the exception would be the lightest duty knife I showed you there was the Para 2. Overall, what are my thoughts on this knife? Well, as a Midtech knife, I think that it's offering some pretty good value because of the fact that here's a Midtech where you really are getting a knife that's been handled by the maker in each case, and that I think is going to be important to a lot of users and buyers. You're also getting a really distinctive design, and I like the fact that you get a knife here that looks really interesting and really different, but doesn't sacrifice any utility, okay? Doesn't sacrifice any function. You know, I have a lot of knives, and I've had a lot of knives that look really cool, but I'm a little hesitant to carry. You know, this knife, it looks awesome. It's a really interesting design, and I would never hesitate to carry this thing. It's designed to be the kind of knife that you can take with you anywhere and do anything, and that's, again, where I think this really shines. Hope you enjoyed the video. Love to hear your comments below, and I'd love to hear the knife that you feel that way about. Like, to me, this is a knife that just inspires a lot of confidence, and I'm sure all of us have a knife like that in our collection, or at least can think of one that we feel like, hey, if I had that, I would really be ready for anything. Hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and we will talk to you soon.